Welcome to Sharing the Light, the Sunshine Cathedral's talk show webcast where we discuss theological, ethical, spiritual, and social issues with the cathedral's pastoral staff. Sunshine Cathedral is a metropolitan community church affiliated with the Center for Progressive Christianity. We're located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Now, we hope you will enjoy this episode of Sharing the Light. Hello and welcome to Sharing the Light, and thank you for joining us. Today I'm joined by the senior pastor of Sunshine Cathedral, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, and also the Reverend Brian Hutchison, who is our new volunteer coordinator here at the Sunshine Cathedral. Welcome to you both on this episode. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that was recently repealed and signed by President Obama. And also, we're going to be addressing the DREAM Act that was failed to reach the Senate floor for discussion. So as we begin this discussion today, Pastor, why don't you lead us into how we're going to shake this around the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and the DREAM Act?
Well, first of all, why don't you say something about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell experience? You were in the Navy until 1996, and so Don't Ask, Don't Tell had already been in effect for I guess about 4 years, 3 or 4 years by that time. So you actually lived with it. Why don't you say something about your experience of it, and then we can go from there.
It was kind of an interesting time to be on active duty when the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy came into effect, because at that point, we didn't consider it to be an issue. Everything for us was based on performance and evaluation, and then no one was really looking at one individual sexuality about how they perform or didn't perform. But once Don't Ask, Don't Tell came into play, it really became more or less this witch hunt in the armed services. And a lot of good people and a lot of my good friends were actually brought up on charges through the witch hunt and also discharged from the armed services. And so to be looking at that now back 17 and a half years later, it is kind of an interesting thing to look at what that policy now means as it has been repealed and the harm that it did to a lot of people while on active duty and since I've left the armed services. And so as we kind of get our heads around what it means now to live in a post Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it's going to mean something different. And I'm glad that people are beginning to wrestle with what it means to no longer have that policy around. I just said to someone recently, the thing around the Don't Ask, Don't Tell is like, we can look at history with this. People have used people of color, African Americans, when the armed services was integrated as a reason as to why this shouldn't happen. I remember when women first came on active duty, but when they first went on submarines in the Navy, and of course that was a problem to have women on submarines and then subsequently on carriers. And so with that, yes, you can see a person's color. Yes, clearly you can see women, but one sexual orientation you can't necessarily see. So it's that thing that we can't see that has often threatened people. And so I think people are threatened, if there is a threat, by that notion of what they can't see, as opposed to really thinking about, their own individual lives and what it means for them to live lives that are authentic in this post-repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Now, the military leadership, though, recently actually supported the repeal. Mm-hmm. It was senators and congressmen and pundits and
mm-hmm.
and those guys that were actually so against it. That part of helping the repeal happen was that the military leadership said we've done a study, right, and there's nothing to suggest that this affects the effectiveness of the armed services at all. And in fact, there were military, Israel, for example, who have had openly same-gender loving people serving for years, and they have very effective militaries. And so I wonder how much of it is just whenever in our culture, because our culture in the U.S., we have a long history of this. Whenever the status quo is threatened, whenever the dominant society is threatened, whenever whoever holds some sort of privilege has to open up that privilege, share that privilege, so it's no longer privilege, it becomes equality. Right. There is always harsh pushback, and I wonder just how much of that is just part of our. We always know what's great about being American, but that's part of the shame of, I think, of American history, is that when we say liberty for all, we really mean liberty for those who already have it. It means protecting those who already have it, but we're very reluctant sometimes to include those who don't yet have it.
Right.
And so I wonder just how much of that is our...
I think a lot of it is probably our own internal stuff that we have to deal with, and I think as we now begin to live into this, we're going to see probably a much more progressive military, if you will, that really is about being open and being accessible to people across the board. And when I was in armed services, the biggest thing was like, well, we don't discriminate in armed services. Well, there's a way that it does and it doesn't happen. It's kind of a unique thing. But I think this is yet one of those lenses by which we can now say another ism has been repealed, and there will be more to be addressed. And and then when you throw in the military structure and the religious folks who are just so condemning of gays serving openly in armed services, what they I think fail to realize is that people who are now serving can now serve openly are the same people who are protecting their constitutional right to say what they say. Right. So it's kind of that, how do we really live into that, and what does it mean?
The two most interesting, most powerful quotes that I heard around all this was one was on a soldier's headstone, who said, "I was given a medal for killing 2 men and a discharge for loving one."
Malkovich.
And the other one very recently was a local person here saying that people who are willing to die for their country shouldn't be forced to lie to their country.
Exactly.
And so this is an integrity issue. This is love and attraction and honesty and pursuit of happiness. These are some of life's most treasured gifts. And so to force people to hide those or to have to act like they're ashamed of those is very harmful to the individual. Mm-hmm. And so this is one more healing step in all of that.
So let's get into this Dream Act just a little bit.
Well, that's the bittersweet thing about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell is that on the same day that was repealed, the Dream Act fell 5 votes short of even coming to a debate on the Senate floor. And so one step forward for justice and then a step back. Not everyone benefited that day.
Brian, what's your take on that? Yeah.
I think both share an issue of scarcity of rights and of resources, that this mentality that is shared both with the LGBT community and also with immigrants, that is there enough for everybody? And as a person of faith, I always say yes, resoundingly. But for me, the question is how can we create an environment and spread a message of prosperity, that there is enough, and that we can share all that we have.
For a nation of immigrants, which is what we are, people still will very glowingly talk about their Italian grandparents or their Irish parents or their Polish grandparents or their Russian great-grandparents, whatever. For this nation of immigrants to at the same time be so xenophobic is another one of the great shames that we have to address and deal with. Is that we are a nation of immigrants. I mean, and there were native people here before we got here, and through our own sort of colonization. In fact, our founding narrative is about the 13 colonies. Through colonization and imperial expansion, sort of decimated the native cultures, so the culture that has survived is a culture of an immigrant culture. That that we are all descendants of people from England and France and Holland and Mexico and Portugal and wherever, West Africa, and so it's really to our shame that this nation of immigrants now so forcefully opposes ways to help people become immigrants. Especially the Dream Act was about children who've grown up here. This is their country in everything except for paperwork. And it was just to make it a little bit easier for them. They weren't born here, but they were brought here when they were very young. They grew up here. They were educated here. And if they were willing to go to university here, or join our military, if they were willing to become professionals in our society and support our economy, or if they were willing to join our military and defend our liberties, then legal status would be much easier for them, and that the Senate would not even allow that to come to the floor for debate. I almost never use the word sin.
Yeah, that's the biggest sin of all of this.
But that was a sin, that these people deserved at least a debate. And that the Senate basically said, no, you're not even worth the conversation. That was a great shame in the moment of our country. I think it's like all of our great shames; it'll be redeemed. We'll come back to it. We'll do better later. But that was not our proudest moment.
Well, I think this debate and the conversation is going to last for quite a while, and certainly around the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and hopefully the Dream Act will have an opportunity to come back up again next year as they begin to deal with it. And just from a justice standpoint, it would be the right thing to do. And so we have a lot of work to do, and yet we still celebrate living into the Don't Ask, Don't Tell being repealed and now signed by President Obama. And I think as that justice-seeking church and denomination that we are, we still have work to do, and this is just one of those areas that we get to do it in. So thank you both for being with us on this episode, and thank you for joining us today here on Sharing the Light. Thank you for joining us for another great episode of Sharing the Light. Tell your friends about this online ministry, and when you're in Southeast Florida, make sure you worship with us on a Sunday at the 9 a.m., the 10:30 a.m., or the 6 p.m. service. And now for a final word from our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins.
Email me at durrell@sunshinecathedral.net if you have a religious question or if you'd like to subscribe to our daily devotional magazine, Spirit and Truth. We'll send it anywhere in the United States for an annual donation of any size. You can also email us prayer requests, or you can make donations on our website, www.sunshinecathedral.org. You'll also want to check out our great performing arts series, religious education classes, conferences, and other exciting activities. For now, we wish you many blessings on your spiritual journey.